Morning. Welcome to the April 5, 2023 Canaveral Port Authority Board of Commissioners meeting. I'll ask Commissioner Van Valkenburg to lead us in the pledge, please. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, Derek. May I have a motion to approve our agenda?
Move.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Commissioner Allender.
May I have a motion to approve our previous meeting minutes?
So moved, Mr. Chair. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to say hello to all of you, including, we have some ambassadors in attendance. Mike Gautreaux, there he is. Dennis Hepburn, very good. Bob Sox, all right. Sean Conway, hello. And the ever-present Ambassador Emeritus, Mac McLeod. Good morning, Mac. Now, apparently, Amanda will lead the next presentation. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. This morning we're going to be talking about the HELM program that we have been supporting. We work with the Education Committee in the Propeller Club to support the HELM program. And so many times we say little parts of what we do, but we thought it would be really fun to have the students actually come and speak for themselves. So as you know, we are involved in things like job shadowing. We also do mock interviews. We do tours. We do everything we can to help support their education. And we have been lucky enough to have a HELM program graduate participate as an intern recently, and we hired a HELM program graduate to do line handling last month. So it's very exciting to see the progression of the program. So I would like to introduce now Sarah Hardy, and she is the HELM program director, and she will be bringing her students to do the presentation. Thank you.
Great.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. So I'm honored to have 7 students here with us today to talk to you some about the HELM program, what we do, and all the wonderful things that you as a commission and the Canaveral Port Authority has done to support our program. And I also just want to offer my thanks for all of your support. And so I'll let our students introduce themselves and talk to you some about the program and why they enjoy it. Just make sure you're talking. Okay.
Hello, my name is Reagan Doyle. I am currently a senior at Rockledge High School, and I've been a part of the HELM program for 4 years.
Good morning, my name is Aiden Berlew. I'm also a senior, and I've also been in the HELM program for 4 years. We're just here to introduce and explain our program to you guys.
So HELM stands for Helping Educate Leaders in Maritime. Through this course, we will be able to learn about career skills, the Coast Guard, all the way to marine life. In class, we have simulators. We've built sea perch ROVs, taken a boater safety course, and we have been able to partake in career mentoring, job shadowing, field trips, and on-the-job training, and had guest speakers. We originally chose to be a part of this because it's supposed to be a fun elective, but we ended up falling in love with it and taking it every year since.
This class has been very important to us because it not only we learn a lot, but we've been able to go outside of the regular classroom, which we're in for 8 hours a day, and it's just really important that students experience real life situations, and it's given us a lot of experience that we can take on into our future careers. It has influenced my future because although I won't be going into the maritime program, I know that I always can just because I have this experience, and there's a lot of things that interest me in it, and if psychology doesn't work out for me, then I definitely will be looking here local at Port Canaveral.
I originally entered the class with no interest in working in the maritime industry, but after multiple years of visiting and job shadowing, I am now currently waiting on a response from the Coast Guard Academy, and I plan on pursuing a degree in government and serving in the Coast Guard after college.
That's great.
So 7 of us were able to attend the career shadowing and walk through like different departments that you guys have here. My partner and I, Chris, we went through IT and we were with Mr. Brian. And while we were with him, there was kind of like a crisis, and it was really interesting to see how he worked through it with his team. And although IT may not be the path I pursue just because it seemed really stressful, it was just really important to me to see how he worked through that, just because it was like an authentic experience that I got to have.
Emily and I were able to go with Miss Sam and Miss Terry, and we saw behind the scenes of the Park and Recs department, and we were able to go see the public docks used and visit Jetty Park, and we were able to see what they do to keep it up running and smoothly. After seeing it, we know that Emily has definitely taken an interest in it, so she's done her own research into it and possibly maybe taking that path in the future. We're grateful to have been able to participate in the job shadowing, and it's left us with experiences that no matter what field we enter, we know we can use it in future experiences.
Thank you guys so much for allowing us to take part in the career shadow, and thank you guys for listening.
So if the commissioners have any questions, the kids would be happy to answer them, or I can answer any questions about the program at this time.
Well, I thought that was a great polished presentation. And,
These are, yeah, they're great.
better than
Thank
I
you.
would have been under the circumstances. And just an observation to you both, Ken, you never stop being a parent, that I was very encouraged that your eyes were open and you got to experience different things that you may not necessarily have thought you were interested in. But that's part of not only a successful life, but a successful career is being receptive to learning. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next presentation, which is a federal legislative update by Chris Johnson, a partner in Jones Walker. And we're looking forward, I know I'm looking forward with great anticipation to once again have him educate us as to what's going on. Thank you, Diane.
Good morning, Commissioners. First, if I could make a comment on the Helm program. When I started here in March of 2017, I think Sarah had 30 students in the program, and I don't know if you noticed, they're up to 180 students now. That's in 6 years. That's remarkable. A great testimony to the success of that program. Good morning. This morning we have Chris Johnson. Chris is a partner with Jones Walker, the consulting firm that represents Port Canaveral and Washington, D.C. I think I've mentioned many times in the past, Port Canaveral could not do what we do if it were not for the support of the consultants that we have working with us in Washington and Tallahassee. This morning, Chris is going to fill you in on kind of the landscape in DC and much of what goes on to support Canaveral Port Authority. Chris is a well-respected, well-known maritime professional in the industry, and particularly in Washington, D.C. He has tremendously strong relationships with many of the key committees of jurisdiction and oversight for ports, seaports, and maritime transportation. Among those include the Senate Commerce Committee, the House and Senate Armed Services Committee, and of course you've heard me speak about the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Chris is deeply involved in the industry, has been an architect of some very significant legislation positively affecting the maritime industry, and I think you'll enjoy his presentation this morning. Chris?
Thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here and get out of Washington. I try to get out of Washington as often as possible. So, as Diane mentioned, I am the managing partner of the Washington office of Jones Walker. We've had the honor of representing Port Canaveral in Washington for the past 5 years. When we took this assignment on, none of us anticipated COVID and dealing with all of the challenges that that brought to this port and to the maritime industry. But we got through it, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our firm. Let's see, Diane, how do I advance? This one? So our footprint is in the southeastern United States. We have offices, of course, here in Florida, across the Gulf Coast, and in Washington. We have one of the largest, if not the largest, maritime practices of any law firm in the country. And of course, as you would expect, in that role, we deal with ports, shipyards, shipping lines, P&I insurance syndicates, and anything that, or any entity that impacts the maritime industry. And in my case, shipping has literally been part of my family. My family started and built years ago a U.S. flag shipping company over many decades, and I grew up at the dining room table learning about this great industry. And as John and I have discussed, I really didn't have any choice but to get into this industry, or else I wouldn't be welcome at home for Christmas and family gatherings, where all we talk about, it seems, is the maritime industry. In Washington, my main focus, as Diane mentioned, for the last really 30 years, has been efforts to preserve and enhance the maritime industry. And it has been quite an experience. The American maritime industry is not what it once was. Ports continue to drive so much economic activity, but there are other parts of the industry which unfortunately we've seen outsourced out of the United States. So we never run out of challenges and issues. As far as it pertains to Port Canaveral and our strategy in Washington, we believe it's critically important to have a multi-layer strategy. Some would say, well, you just have to deal with the Congress. If you deal with the Congress alone, you're not addressing all of the potential issues that could affect this port and the larger industry. So we deal with the Congress, we deal with the White House and multiple federal agencies, including, of course, primarily the Coast Guard, Commissioner Justice, but lots of other agencies. And we also make it a point to deal with others in the private sector, both here in Florida and around the country, who share our vision and our priorities. And we often are working in a coalition with other ports and other interested parties and the cruise lines as appropriate to advance different issues in Washington, or to play defense if we're in a situation where we think something negative is happening. As it relates to Congress, of course, we deal very closely on your behalf with the Florida congressional delegation. Both Senator Rubio and Senator Scott have been ardent champions for this port, very accessible whenever John, Diane, and I need to see them. Also very, very responsive. Our Congressman Bill Posey, or the congressman for this area, is equally aggressive and helpful, has gone over and above the call of duty multiple times when we've had different issues that have required his assistance. Of course, we deal with the delegation and Congress in general on a bipartisan basis. and some of the members that we deal with regularly are Debbie Wasserman Schultz and John Rutherford, both of whom sit on the House Appropriations Committee, and we make it our business to deal with them. You know, when Bonnie and Clyde were robbing banks, they used to ask them, well, why do you do that? And they would say, well, that's where the money is. So we deal with the Appropriations Committee regularly because that's where the money is. Others in the delegation that we deal with, Darren Soto, Maxwell Frost, a new member to the delegation, Brian Mast, who sits on the Transportation Committee, Frederica Wilson, who has co-chaired the Florida Ports Caucus over the years in Congress, Corey Mills, and interestingly, Congressman Webster has just been made the chair of the Coast Guard and Maritime Subcommittee in the House, which is great for Canaveral and great for Florida because there will be no maritime legislation and nothing affecting the Coast Guard that doesn't have to go through his subcommittee and have his fingerprints on it. So that is a great and somewhat unexpected development as a result of last year's election. So I've mentioned before how important it is to deal not only with Congress, but with federal agencies. So these federal agencies can either make our lives very easy at Port Canaveral, or they can literally shut things down overnight. It's therefore very important to work collaboratively with them and to deal with them when we don't have a crisis. So when the balloon does go up, we have folks who know the port and are helpful in resolving issues. So we work closely with the Federal Maritime Commission. We work equally closely with the Maritime Administration. Those two agencies get confused by folks from time to time. The FMC, the Federal Maritime Commission, enforces the Shipping Act and pretty much sets the rules for international operation of vessels and ports in and throughout the country. The Maritime Administration is a promotional agency that promotes ports and the larger industry. Obviously, I don't need to mention how important the Corps of Engineers is. If the Corps isn't maintaining Canaveral Harbor and the surrounding areas, we can't get vessels in and out. And then Homeland Security, we have within Homeland Security Customs and Border Protection, CBP, as well as the Coast Guard, two agencies that are essential to the day-to-day operation of this port. So we work with both of them on a regular basis. Then in the private sector, outside of Congress and federal agencies, we work with these groups, often in coalitions. So the Florida Ports Council, as you know, they represent all of the seaports in Florida, and we work with Mike Rubin there regularly. CLIA is the trade association, as you all know, for the cruise industry. We coordinate with them quite closely. AAPA, American Association of Port Authorities, represents many of the ports from across the country. And there are other groups that we deal with as necessary. Sometimes an issue will come up where we deal with it directly on behalf of Port Canaveral. Other times there are issues where we need a larger coalition from across the country or across Florida. And so it's very important to work with these other groups. With that said, let me turn to some of the specific things we have worked on in Washington for you all and some issues that we're currently dealing with. I don't need to remind this group and the folks here about the dark times that Port Canaveral and other cruise ports experienced during COVID. None of us ever anticipated that type of problem, but it befell all of us, and seemingly overnight, your primary source of revenue, the cruise industry, completely shut down. So we immediately went to work with John and Diane and the team here, interacting regularly with the Florida delegation, the White House, frankly, anybody who would listen to talk about the financial hardship that COVID caused here at Port Canaveral and frankly at other cruise ports. We worked with ports across Florida, ports across the United States, and through a lot of hard work and perseverance, in the very last COVID relief package that Congress passed, the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA, Congress was good enough to include what ultimately became $250 million for ports in Florida. And then with the good work and help of Governor DeSantis and the Florida legislature, as you all well know, $72.2 million of that $250 million was allocated to the port here, Port Canaveral. We were very proud to be part of that at a time when you all were suffering significant financial hardship. It took a lot of hard work and effort, and I'll mention, interestingly, that one of the key players in the end was former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and we worked with ports in California to in turn deal with the then Speaker, and in the end she made quite a difference. But it wouldn't have happened without Marco Rubio, Rick Scott, and many members of the Florida delegation. So we were quite proud of that, and sorry we had to go through that, but we were glad to get a good result. Let me just touch on a couple of other issues that we have worked on or are working on, and I'll say that I'll do most of these at a high level, but if you all have any questions, glad to get into the details. CBP has, over the years, been interested in getting Port Canaveral and other ports to enter into free space lease agreements. Without going into all of the sordid details about that, I'll just say that with Congressman Posey and Senator Rubio's help, we've tamped down that issue for now, but we're keeping a close eye on it. Another issue that has popped up over the last year or so is something that we frankly hadn't anticipated. Out of nowhere, the Department of Commerce proposed to impose all manner of navigation restrictions and speed restrictions on vessels operating on the East Coast with the goal of protecting the endangered right whale population. And of course, we are all for protecting the right whale population, but we want to make sure that it's done in a way that is safe and doesn't create other problems and unsafe operating conditions for vessels coming in and out of this port and frankly other ports on the East Coast. So we're in the middle of that. Another issue, drones. Drones have been an issue here at Port Canaveral, as you all know, with unexpected drone activity over the port when we have cruise ships in port. Senator Grassley of Iowa has a bill to impose reasonable restrictions on drone operations over what he calls critical infrastructure. His bill right now is limited, or not limited, but primarily focused on airports. Senator Rubio and Senator Scott are working with him to expand that to also cover seaports, so that drone activity would be limited over those facilities. I would mention also that the NFL is very involved in this issue because they're very concerned about drone activity over NFL stadiums. So there are a lot of folks focused on this, and we do think in this Congress there's likely to be legislation on that topic that gets signed into law. Another issue that we are having lots of conversations about with the delegation and others in Washington is the inevitable tension that has developed or could develop between the burgeoning space industry here and maritime operations at the port. We want both of those interests to thrive. We want to work obviously very cooperatively with the space industry, but given the increased tempo of launches and the restrictions that go in place with regard to vessels operating in and around the port, we want to make sure that there is proper coordination and the logistics are handled properly, so that cruise vessels and other vessels can come in and out of the port without any major problems. So we're dealing with the Coast Guard, NASA, the FAA, and others on that. I mentioned the Corps. I won't spend much time on that other than to say we work with the Corps on an annual basis to make sure that there is funding for the sand bypass and maintenance of Canaveral Harbor. Marella Cruises. Let me touch on that briefly. As you all know, that Marella Cruises will be a new cruise service, from Canaveral starting later this year. They came to the United States without fully understanding all of the challenges in dealing with the U.S. federal government, including the Federal Maritime Commission. And if you don't check all the right boxes with the U.S. government, you cannot begin operating out of this port or any other port. So we've helped them with the Federal Maritime Commission. The main issue there has been that the federal government requires any cruise line to put up financial assurances that if that cruise line goes belly up or the cruises are canceled, the passengers can be repatriated to their country of origin. And it is done here in the United States differently than Marella is used to in other areas of the world where they operate. So we've helped them navigate, no pun intended, that process. Last thing I'll mention is periodically the port pursues federal grants, particularly from the Maritime Administration. They have a program known as the Port Infrastructure Development Program. And when that happens, we work with the port, with the delegation, and others to generate support for those applications. That gives you all a flavor of some of the things that we have worked on, that we are pursuing for you all now. It has been a great pleasure to work on your behalf in Washington. I think you all will be pleased to know that the port has a wonderful reputation with the congressional delegation and the key committees and agencies who we deal with in Washington. And with that, I will stop and take any questions that you all may have.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And all these representative issues that you've identified are, of course, important, but especially of interest to me, candidly, is the interplay between the collaboration, for the most part, between the space industry and maritime operations.
Right.
So I wonder if you could, because I know that's particularly sensitive on a state level as well. That seems to be something that our state representatives like to address, if not toy with, somewhat. So I'm interested to hear what you think about that.
Well, I would start by saying at the outset, for this region of Florida, it's a good problem to have. To have a vibrant, thriving Port Canaveral in the same area with a thriving and growing space industry. But with that success and with all of that economic activity on land, sea, and air, lots of challenges flow from that. As you all know, when there is a launch, and I think the tempo now is for, how many, Diane? 92 this year. There are immediate restrictions that are placed on vessel operations in and around the area before, during, and after the launch. And then if the launch is scrubbed or delayed, those restrictions stay in place. And to my knowledge, those restrictions have not yet caused any delay or problems for cruise vessels coming in and out of the port. But it doesn't take much of a leap of vision with this type of tempo of launches to anticipate that those problems could arise, and we don't want to be in a situation where we have cruise vessels that are either coming into or getting ready to depart from the port, and they're restricted because of a launch that has or is about to happen. So it's an issue that we're focused on. There are multiple parties, as I mentioned, and multiple federal agencies that have a role in this. We think the Coast Guard has been very constructive and understands what needs to be done to create a lane for vessels to get in and out. But it is going to require continued vigilance and something that is not always the case, and that is good cooperation between the federal agencies that oversee this. So you got to get NASA, the Coast Guard, FAA, and maybe others all talking and working together. Not always easy, but it's essential if these industries are going to continue to thrive.
Well, also the stakeholders, all the commercial, they have a lot of desires and aspirations in terms of interacting, how they interact with port and port resources, and so.
Indeed, and I leave that to John.
Yeah. I'd like to compliment you and thank Chris for all the work on all these are top issues, big, very important issues. Looking ahead, this administration touts its infrastructure plan, which means as we move forward with our opportunities, which are great here right now, the continued help on the Port Infrastructure Development Program, getting that infrastructure. I mean, we've got projects here ready to go, and I know you're working on it. We'll just talk about one again here today, so we just want to keep moving forward, and thank you. Thanks for the efforts.
Thank you. So the Port Infrastructure Development Program received several $1 billion in the infrastructure bill that Congress passed. That program those funds are spread out over 5 years. So we've had the first year, we have 4 more years of those funds being distributed. And it's frankly more money than the federal government has ever had to address, bolster, and improve port infrastructure. But as John and his team know, it also comes with various federal strings and conditions, and so it is not appropriate for every project to go after the PIDP funds. We could get into that in more detail if you wanted, but there is a big pot of money there if you're willing to live with the federal strings and conditions that are imposed with it.
Anyone else?
Chris and Diane, thanks for this update. As far as I can remember, this is the first maybe federal legislative update we've had. Periodically, it is nice to, Chris, to have you or somebody from your office come down and just advise us what's going on.
You don't have to twist my arm to come down to Florida. I'll come once a month if you'll have me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Captain Murray, I believe you're up now for the chairman's report. Officer, excuse me.
Good morning. All right, we'll start out with our usual format. Cruise numbers been very strong, even through February. We've had a very, very successful season starting in October, and just to highlight the almost 400 cruise ship calls, we had 2.8 million multi-day passengers through February. This is a reminder, last year we finished the year with just under 4.1 for the year. So we're well ahead of our track record for last year. A couple of changes that we'll update here. The Norwegian Prima finished her final call was March 26th. She's gone off to other locations and will ultimately end up in Europe for the summer. The Norwegian Getaway is back. She's replacing the Norwegian Escape home port through the summer months. The Escape has been with us through the winter season. The Getaway will be with us through the summer. Mariner of the Seas is here today. You know, we have a commission day and you have a cruise ship alongside. That's very rare on a Wednesday. But the Mariner's been in dry dock for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and she just returned on April 5th today, and she'll be going into service tomorrow on a 4-day service back in her regular rotation. We have the Jewel of the Seas, last call. She's been a winter vessel from Royal, and she'll be finishing up on April 22nd. MSC is swapping out the Meraviglia, which has been a very successful ship through our winter season. She'll be heading to New York, to home port for the summer. In that vein, she will be coming to Port Canaveral weekly for provisioning. So we'll still see the vessel every week. She'll be replaced on the regular service by the MSC Seaside, which is a slightly newer vessel, and it's a class of vessel that was designed for the warm weather trades, such as the Caribbean trade. So it's got a lot of open decks on it. It's a very unique ship. When you see it, you'll notice that it looks different than the other vessels in port. It's really a unique design. So we're excited to have her starting on April 19th. She'll be with us through the summer and will be replaced by the MSC Seashore sister vessel in the fall. Yes, sir.
Is that their newest ship, Seaside? Is that their...
Seashore is the newest. Well, actually, they've got other newer ones that have been delivered in Europe. They're not trading in the U.S., but as far as the U.S. goes, Seashore is the newest. It was delivered last year, and Seaside was just prior to that. It's within the last 3 or 4 years. It's essentially new because it didn't run for 18 months during COVID. So it's an exciting ship to have here. We're really great to see it. And then the last point is the Meraviglia making the port of calls for provision. I like to throw this graph up just to show how our cruise population has grown. And it's a full year, so you see in February of last year we're slightly under 300,000. February is generally a down month. We peak in December, November, December, and then there's a trough in January, February. We peak again in March, April with spring break. But you can see the difference between last year and this year on our guest count for the month of February. On the cargo side, numbers have been good. 221 ship calls year to date. Cargo revenues at 7 million. Tonnage is 3 million tons. We have continued negotiations with our port partners for potential new bulk and break bulk opportunities. There's quite a bit of business that wants to come to Port Canaveral, and the question is, what can we handle and not handle efficiently? So we're currently in those discussions. We're also in ongoing discussions with multiple commercial space companies. You know, we've had the pleasure and actually enjoyment of working with SpaceX exclusively for the last several years, but now some of the other players are coming to the table, like Space Perspective and Relativity Space and Blue Origin, and you know the field is starting to widen with different discussions with the different companies and their concepts of operation, which are for the most part different for every company. So it's an exciting time for the port. On the communications side, we had quite a number of events this past month. We hosted the business professors from Florida University statewide. I was not here at the time, but it was quite an event with FIU, FIT, UF. Our cruise and business cargo business development teams discussed our lines of business and what we do, and then they had a port-wide tour of the operations. We also were very active. Seatrade Cruise Global was last week in Fort Everglades, and we participated in a panel I participated in a panel discussion with cruise executives on what it takes to be a home port, which was an interesting session. We also had multiple interviews with major cruise industry publications and had another great opportunity to get our brand out in the world format. We also received the 2023 Impact Cruise Award from Det Norske Veritas, a classification society from Norway for cruise industry contributions. On the government relations update, we also 2 weeks ago were up in Tallahassee with the FSTED, Florida Seaport Transportation Economic Development Council, and Florida Ports Council board meetings. We had port allocations for infrastructure and seaport security for the upcoming fiscal year. We also discussed at a reception with the Brevard legislative delegation members, and on the right you can see Senator Wright was there with his wife, and on the bottom we had CFO Jimmy Petronas joined us for that evening. The following day, we also had a briefing with the Governor's Office, Chief of Staff, and Director of Policy and Budget, just to give an overview of port growth, commercial space operations, and just to go over how we're working together and just to elevate our messaging in Tallahassee as to how we are progressing with the growth here. We also met with Chairman Bobby Payne and the House Infrastructure Strategies Committee, and we discussed the importance of seaport infrastructure. Representative Payne is leading an effort to expand state monies to the seaports in our state, understanding the value and the importance of Florida seaports to Florida's overall economy, and he'll be progressing that in the next legislative session in 2024. On the federal side, Diane was up in New York with Capitol Hill meetings on March 6th. Topics included Army Corps funding for Canaveral Harbor, sand bypass, meetings with Customs Border Protection Coast Guard partnerships, including PASA, which is the Ports and Waterways Safety Assessment, which is the concept that we've been working with the Coast Guard, having dedicated fairways into Port Canaveral to put our marine traffic in a safe zone, so no matter what the launch routine may be from the Space Center, that we're always out of harm's way with the major traffic coming in and out of Port Canaveral. That unfortunately won't be as helpful for the fishing industry and all of the other users of the port, which will still travel through the safety zones, but we can capture the large-scale vessels coming in and out of our port. It will simplify the process overall. Also, Representative Dan Webster, Chairman of the House T&I Committee from Florida, he's visited the Mardi Gras a few weeks ago, and it was a engine room visit to see how their trash disposal systems and it was mostly all the green stuff on the ship. How does that work? And it was a very, very good tour, and he had a very good visit at the port and with Carnival Cruise Line. On the environmental side, we had a Trash Bash 2023 on April 1st, Love Where You Live, partnered with Keep Brevard Beautiful and the Port Canaveral Propeller Club. We also removed an estimated 400 pounds of trash from Freddie Patrick Boat Ramp and Jetty Park shoreline. It amazes me that we seem to have these trash removal things every month, and they move hundreds of pounds of trash out. So I wish people would treat our environment a little bit nicer when they come to Port Canaveral. We also have the Disney Cruise Line Earth Month cleanup scheduled for Saturday, April 15th at Jetty Park. The crew from the Disney Fantasy and Shoreside team will join in that cleanup effort. On the recreation side, we had a daily average of almost 400 vehicles in February, and campground occupancy was at 94%. So we had a pretty strong winter season at Jetty Park. Upcoming events, April 14th, we have the Propeller Club Shrimp Fest at Cruise Terminal 5, and on April 22nd, Cape Kennedy Corvette Club's Vets at the Port Car Show will come back for its annual event. On the human resources side, we had on April 19th, Eastern Florida Student and Alumni Job Fair at the Melbourne Campus Student Union from 1 to 4. And on April 20th, we have Career Source Job Fair in Rockledge, and it's going to be recruiters from the port, Titusville, cities of Titusville, Cocoa, Cape Canaveral, Rockledge, and Cocoa Beach. The bottom line is we're all looking for people. It's still hard to hire folks. Particularly at certain grades and job types, and we live in Florida, and it seems like the jobs that are outside are the hardest ones to fill. So we're extending our reach now to try and cast a wider net on bringing in new employees. On public safety, we're pursuing a FEMA hazard mitigation grant program funding for a portable 400 kilowatt generator. We also partnered with the Coast Guard for a heavy weather planning workshop scheduled for April 12th here in the Commission Room. We have a Joint Agency Terrorism Task Force Executive Committee on April 12th. There's a few of us that are involved in that. It's largely with the FBI and other agencies. We meet twice a year, Peter, I guess, once or twice a year, I think. We also are evaluating projects for FEMA Port Security Grant funding that's upcoming as well. And with that, I want to thank you. And just for what this picture is, this was the team we had that cycled in and out at Sea Trade last week. I want to thank everybody that came down, made a great success of our booth and all of our operations during C-Trade. It was very valuable. And that picture on the back we had that on the back of our booth, and it turned out to be one of the most useful tools that when we're talking to people about Port Canaveral, we'd walk around to the back and we had this life-size map of the port, and it's printed on silk paper, or silk cloth, so it's easily removable and easy to set up again. So it was quite an event. The team did a great representation of our port. So, any questions? With that, I have one last item that is Mike comes up to present the financials. We, next month, are going to do a mid-year budget update. We've had some changes. The year started out, once again, we were trying to estimate where we were going to go with the cruise industry return. It's returned stronger than we had originally anticipated in the budget, so it's appropriate that we do a mid-year update so that our end-year numbers will be closer to reality of what we budgeted. So with that, no other questions?
One question.
Yes, sir.
John, what's going on, if anything, with GTUSA?
GTUSA is doing quite a bit. They're moving quite a bit of lumber through the port right now. They've got some tentative ideas for what they might want to do as we extend through the year. Currently, SpaceX is operating on the eastern side of their property, and the western side is a large crane that's going to be coming in pieces to be assembled for Blue Origin. So when Blue Origin starts their operation with the New Glenn, this huge crane, it's not a crane that would be useful for any of our operations. It's very unique and purposely designed specifically for that. Will be on the western end of GT's property, and they'll be running the booster through there.
How much longer is their lease runs?
I'd get the number wrong if I threw it off the top of my head, but the initial lease term was 20 years. They're about 6-7 years into it now, and then there's extension options beyond that.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Mr. Poole.
Thank you. Good morning. As John noted, so the numbers that we'll be presenting to you today are 5 months into our year. However, this being an April 5th board meeting, we haven't fully closed out March, which is our 6th month into our year, but we do see how the revenues are performing. And for the month of March, it's similar to February. And so we're seeing trends, so that, the trends that we were seeing as far as occupancy levels on our ships and parking levels at our port that we were seeing the last, say, 4 to 5 months of last fiscal year have continued on for the first 6 months of this year. And because of that, we will be presenting at the next board meeting, April 26th, a mid-year budget, and we'll be adjusting revenues. We'll make some minor adjustments to operating expenses. Our capital budget, we're gonna, the 5-year budget, we'll be making some minor modifications to that. One project that Bill will be discussing, North Cargo Berth 4, was originally scheduled to be a fiscal year 24 project. We're advancing that forward in the current year. So capital budget will reflect that. And we'll be adding some items in years 2 through 5 of the capital budget. So we'll be presenting that for the board. It'll be advertised. It'll needs just one meeting for approval, unlike the initial budget that is, you guys, we presented to you in August and then final approval in September. So it takes 2 passes before this body for a mid-year budget modification. It just takes one reading here. Will be a public hearing that we'll have, but that'll happen on April 26th, but we'll brief each one of the board members individually on it. So let's go and how are we doing on our numbers here? Let me see if I can turn the slides here. Thank you, sorry. So 5 months into our year, revenues are at $81 million, $17 million above budget. Expenses at $45 million are slightly $1 million below budget. And what is the breakdown? That cruise is $15 million of that almost $17 million positive revenue variance. And that's because parking is coming in at a higher frequency and passengers. At the 288,000 additional passengers, that's about 11% above what we originally forecasted. We were forecasting 100% occupancy, and it looks like for the past 6 months of this year, 4 months of last year, 10 months, we've returned back to those pre-pandemic levels, which were always at about 110% of double occupancy. So the final amount is cargo at $1.5 million being above budget, tons 447,000 above budget. Cargo is above by about 17%. That's fuel, it's lumber, and a lot of granite. It's those three main line items that are bringing in those amounts above budget. This is the month of February by itself, $17 million. We budgeted $12 million, so we're $5 million above budget. If you were to look on a month-by-month basis here, this is just cruise by itself, on the first quarter and how we're doing this year, we're averaging about $15 million a month in revenues, and cruise passengers are about 500,000 per month. We budgeted 5.8 million. It looks like cruise passengers are going to be coming in at about 6.5 million. We budgeted about 6.5 million tons of cargo, so that means it should be coming in at a clip of about 550,000 tons a month. And if you can see in my memo, I say it's the month of February is 560,000 tons. So cargo is coming in at a very predictable pace, slightly ahead of budget. But cruise is coming in at about 530,000 passengers per month. The only month that is an anomaly, you see the first quarter here. I'll be reporting on a quarterly basis here. You had October through December, 1.7 million passengers. October and November, 500,000 passengers each month. Month of December, we had a spike, 5 weeks, additional calls. We had 700,000 passengers. In dollar amounts, instead of 15 million a month, that month it went up to 19 million. But January and February and March, it's back to the same predictable levels. 500,000 passengers, 550,000 tons of cargo, and $15 million of revenue. So from a CFO perspective, we like predictability. And so that's why we are totally accepting of doing this mid-year budget. And this just shows you on a monthly basis, 500 becomes 500, 700,000 to December, January and February as well. March, April, are the passenger numbers will increase. In each quarterly period, we always have 1 month that's a little bit higher. It's generally December, it's March, it's April, and it's July. But on every quarterly basis, they're very close. That's the 2.5 million passengers that we budgeted at 2.8 million. That's that 11% ahead of budget. And at cargo, I report cargo at total of what these tenants generate to us to the bottom line. 5 months into the year, that's 8.8 million. John reports it at 7 million to you. That's the wharfage of the dockage. But in addition to that, those tenants pay rent of 1.8 million. So you add those two together, and it represents almost $9 million worth of contribution to the bottom line. We budget $7 million, that's $1.5 million over. I put this line item in here just to tie it into the total lease revenue. Lease revenue by itself is $3.9 million. Cargo tenants contribute $1.8 million. Non-cargo tenants, such as people at the Cove and other tenants, are at $2.1 million. So a very important segment of our business. Those tons, that 3 million tons is above prior year. It's fuel and it's lumber, it's granite, it's limestone as well. And the other three segments of our business are at or above budget. No budget modifications required there. This is for the year. You'll see all the segments are at or above budget. 81.6 million, that's 16.9 million above budget. Going to expenses, you'll see of our 13 departments here, not counting depreciation, but of the 13 departments, all are below budget. The one department is above. That's happened for several months now. Operations, we'll adjust that in the mid-year budget, but that's relating to, on the higher revenue side, related to parking. We have higher credit card processing fees, shuttle bus expenses as well. So that's just as a consequence, it's a nice problem to have. You do additional business, some of your expenses are going to increase as well. So we will adjust that in the mid-year budget on April 26th. Wrapping it up, revenues of $81 million, operating expenses including depreciation is $45 million. That produces a positive operating income of $36 million. Non-op revenues of $12 million. The majority of that are those ARPA funds, that's $72 million that Chris from Jones Walker mentioned. We received those funds over 3 years. There's only about a little over $2 million that's yet to be reimbursed to us, and then that full $72.2 million will be fully received. Operating expenses as interest on our debt, which produces a positive net position of $44 million. What is that money going to? It's pledged to our capital budget. Are there any questions if for anybody from anybody? Commissioner Justice, as our treasurer, if I could ask for the accepting of reports, the approvals of reports as well. Items 2, 3, and 4.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let me just, I will add, great job's being done on the statistical piece here. I mean, we're down to one, somebody's a little, but it's really good job being done. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, yes, the accounts receivable, very strong, very few balances in excess of 30 days column. I'd really like to highlight Diana Mims-Reed, but also Narisa, who has taken over recently, and she's just done a fantastic job of reaching out to our customers and making sure they pay on a timely basis.
Thank you.
I think, Mr. Crow, you're up next for a capital project update, sir.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you an update. I'm going to start with a roll through our consent agenda items. I'm going to start with item 1A, and this is ongoing parking improvements for Cruise Terminal 1. Noting in the first bullet point there the arrival of the Allure of the Seas in November of this year. So agenda item 1A is with Canaveral Construction, adding approximately 576 parking spaces. Security cameras and lighting added to the area shaded in green, the existing employee lot. And if I will note that with this item and what we executed last month at the March Commission meeting, we are constructing a total of 892 spaces for enhancement parking at Cruise Terminal number 1. We do have a future phase that can add up to an additional 409 spaces if that's determined to be required in the future. Moving on to item 1B, it is the annual issue of purchase orders for storm response. We have a series of 4 continuing contracts. They are divided by area of responsibility. The top item is Ivies that handles all of our cruise terminal damage, $800,000, and we have increased that based on response from Hurricane Ian and Nicole last year. The other scopes of work to Hurd Construction, Canaveral Construction, and Rush Marine are all set at $400,000. So we're staying roughly at that same $2 million blanket purchase order total for each year's storm response, and divided as such, 800, 400, 400, and 400. Sir?
Can you go back to the previous one? Something didn't, on 1A, quick question.
Sure.
Explain, okay, the existing employee lot is the same as the phase 2.
Correct.
Okay, so you were putting stumps up that but you're not going to asphalt it.
That's
the
correct.
point.
Yeah, we are capped at a $4 million budget by using continuing contracts. We're using continuing contracts to get this project done as quickly as we can, rather than do a full design and then bid it out. So we can put up security cameras and lighting in that parking lot. It will remain a gravel lot. There's also some access issues that we're working out with the adjacent tenants that do have use of that facility.
Okay, that answers. Thanks.
Very good. Moving on to item 1C, We are really excited to see this project move forward. We received 4 very qualified bids that you see the breakdown of them there on that table. Orion Marine was the selected low bidder. That is item 1C at $38,640,000. There are a couple of gentlemen in the audience from Orion Marine, Jordan West, and the project manager, Mike, what was your last name? Sheffield. Worked with Jordan on North Cargo Berth 8. They did a great job. We're really excited to have Orion back in the port, be working with them once again. And we got a fantastic price on that project. So Patrick Hammond is bringing home our North Cargo Berth 3 project. I've got some slides on that, some photos. And these gentlemen will be dealing with Veronica Narvaez Lugo, project manager on North Cargo Berth 4. So she's going to keep you on your toes. Just be warned. We are waiting on feedback from FPL for that subaqueous crossing, originally estimated at $1.2 million, thinking it's now in the $1.5 to $2 million range, and we'll come back in the near future with that cost. So moving on to an update of North Cargo Berth 3, contractor is wrapping up utility install. That is a stormwater structure that's actually servicing both North Cargo Berth 3 and 4. Dredging subcontractor Dutra mobilized mid-March. That's going to be done in approximately 3 weeks, so it's going to be wrapping up here in the next week or two. And base rock was being installed and asphalt paving began earlier this week. That's a shot from our security cameras, and you see all of the asphalt paving that's being laid down on North Cargo Berth 3 project. So it's looking really good. And contractors begun demobilization, and most of the contract work is going to be wrapped up by the April 7th, which is here in a couple of days. But we do anticipate they're going to run over that by a short period of time. We do have some additional work that we've added late in the game. That's not part of the original base contract, so they'll be working on that for the next 30 days or so. Any questions?
So I don't think it's public knowledge yet, but the silos will be coming down. How does that correlate with the time frame on this project?
There are options to that. And the timing of that tower coming down is tied to the lease expiration, which is in September of 2024 with the CEMEX property. They have roughly 60 days post the completion of that lease to finish removal of the tower. So
we should be done.
We'll be wrapping up with our project, and the towers can come down in, I'm thinking 90 to 120 days total time period toward the end of that lease.
And you had mentioned there's some options for little support for the new project with that.
We've contemplated those options, yes, for the potential use of recycled material, but we, until we award to the contractor today, we're not able to engage in any of those.
We're not ready to go that far yet. We've still got some work to do ahead of time.
I didn't say anything.
Bill, I think you and Mike Poole mentioned that the North Cargo Berth 4 was originally scheduled for 24?
Correct.
So it's moved up. Are there other projects scheduled in 24 that you're contemplating maybe moving forward with this year?
So that's an excellent question.
If I could take that, please, we'll have all that for you at next month's budget review.
Okay, when we allocate all the money. Look forward to it.
Thanks.
This is the traditional slide that just updates you on projects that are ongoing around the port, divided by area, business line. Are there any specific questions that you may have on any one of these projects?
We're moving along at some point on the Rodney Ketchum boat ramp decision, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
The Jetty Park building, it's
The pavilion building itself, the existing structure that sits out there near the beach.
still there.
And we are focusing funds on the camp store. That building does serve a purpose, obviously in the restrooms that are on the north end of that building. That restroom facility is actually an original structure in its own. So we are contemplating removal of the balance of the structure. However, renovating, expanding, leaving those restrooms in place, there's a little bit of a permitting challenge if we were to do something else, something new, something bigger, because that facility is located beyond the coastal construction line. However, taking that existing facility, perhaps doing an open air covered pavilion next to it makes sense in the footprint of the existing structure, and at the same time really just expanding, augmenting those restroom facilities that are key to the public's use. I know that our recreation department is also contemplating the use of food trucks on a regular basis to support that public need for, food on the weekends without having a specific built restaurant.
Okay.
So engineering is poised and ready. We're just waiting on concurrence between the internal customer and their vision, i.e. recreation, and positive direction, affirmative direction given to my team. But we have contractors, designers, poised and ready.
Okay.
That is my brief.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There being no public comment on the consent agenda, I will ask if there are any items that my colleagues wish to pull for discussion.
Nothing here, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to have 3A, please.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
And I have none, Mr. Chairman. Bill did an outstanding job on 1A, 1C, and all those,
I agree.
which is a good way to do it. Give us that information rather than we have to pull it and then you go back.
Thank you. I had more detail, but I'll save it.
And then, next time, I'll see if I can't probe for more detail. And the 5-star restaurant is not in the horizon at Jetty Park, is there? That's been floated?
I've been advised by the CFO that we're considering options.
Oh, okay.
Evaluating all options.
He's ignoring that.
No. Could be a 5-star food truck.
No.
If they have it.
Could be a good alternative. Okay, then.
The way we do it in Florida, they wouldn't do that in the big capital city of Washington.
Okay, so Commissioner Justice.
Peter, could you give us a couple of minutes on the difference between the two different fire trucks, the requirements that we have and the capability that's being delivered? I think that it's good public information to get out there.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the request for Canaveral Fire Rescue. As you know, Canaveral Fire Rescue is our primary first responders for all emergency medical transport, accident, fire response, event support, lifeguards, fire marshal service, the fire academy, and LNG firefighting. In 2022, they responded to 903 calls, and they're on pace to respond for 1,400 calls this year. This request is for $600K in matching funds for the purchase of a new Airlight fire truck. This will be a joint purchase with the City of Cape Canaveral, who approved their portion on the 21st of March. This fire truck will replace the current 1997 26-year-old Airlight truck, which is at the end of its useful life. The chassis and drivetrain are fatigued by age and saltwater intrusion with visible rust and decomposition. Parts are difficult to obtain and maintenance is expensive due to the age and availability of replacement parts. Transmission, engine, and suspension system have far exceeded their expected lifespan, and the truck is no longer in compliance with the National Fire Protection Association requirements. The new Airlight truck is safer, more fuel efficient, with reduced emissions and reduced cancer risks due to carcinogens in the apparatus bay. It has a new light tower for nighttime operations. It can carry 30 extra self-contained breathing apparatus bottles, which they need to fight fires, especially shipboard fires. and they have the capability to refill the bottles on scene. If you fight a shipboard fire, as Commissioner Justice knows, you go through the bottles quite frequently due to the exertion of the firefighters while they're fighting the fire in an enclosed area. In addition, the system of the truck will be able to provide the Brevard County Sheriff's Office dive team. We can refill their bottles if they have an extended operation in the port. It also carries Purple K fire extinguishers to fight LNG fires. It'll carry shoring and stabilization equipment for vehicle accidents and structure and shipboard fires. And it has foam applicators for the application of firefighting foam if it's needed in a firefighting event. So I request your approval for $600K in funding for the purchase of the new Airlight truck to provide CFR with state-of-the-art equipment, which will enable them to be continued to provide outstanding support to the port community and the city of Cape Canaveral. Standing by for any questions.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, Peter, who services our fire trucks, do you know?
Chief?
We use local vendors for most of it, and if it's something like Pierce related, it's taken to Sanford to their shop, or they come to us.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
What's the normal lifespan for a fire truck? Just out of curiosity. I mean, 97 is really, that's a old piece.
26 years. I'd say 10. I mean, one of the trucks we're going to replace is the aerial truck, which is 2011, and that's about out of its compliance too. So
okay,
yeah,
interesting.
Chief, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said that was a good question.
No, I was going to, Chief. Now, when the trucks, when you get the new truck, the other truck's going to go not to truck heaven, but be used somewhere. Is that does it go to a fire academy, or does it get surplus out? Or
so we have donated a lot of them in the past. This one we purchased. I purchased it in '97 for $108,000. They're going to let us keep it till the new one comes in, which is about 28-month bill.
28-month bill, yeah.
And they'll give us $15,000 for it. So I think the ROI on it's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
Just make a point. There's also funding so far in the budget for the other truck that's.
So that's going to be part of a request we made for the state of Florida legislature to fund part of it, and then the remaining that we don't get from the legislature will be split between the city and us for the capital budget for the new aerial truck.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I'll move for approval of consent agenda item 3 alpha.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to approve the remaining items 1A, 1B?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Very good.
Approval consent item 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 4A.
Clarification of, yeah, there's no 4A, but okay, thank you. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So we are at the public comment portion at the closure of our meeting, and Mr. McLeod, come visit with us.
Thank you for giving me this time. This is a follow-up to Dr. Jeff Abel's and Gary Zarello's FIT research in the feasibility of a lagoon seawater inflow permit for the port. And I've been following this for the last 20 years, I guess. And it is moving along very well, and I'm very excited about it. And I wanted to comment on it. That it relates essentially to the use of we're located just south of the port, lock systems, and to bring in seawater to upgrade the waters that are essentially kept to themselves in a sense, but they're reducing the flow to the south through because of the 528 causeway. The design of a two-way controlled weir located just north as far as west of the South Corps of Engineers Lock would allow the construction of a small boat marina for the port's workboats, tugs, fireboats, security boats, craft, and pilots that are now housed on the existing or potentially deep draft piers in the port. And this is a problem that I've been aware of for about 40 years. The design and construction will necessitate a coordination with replacement of all of the 401 bascule bridge, the high bridges, and with a high bridge and modification of 401 and 528 roadways. The key is, I think, the permitting of the total construction of the weir, the dredging of Ascot Lagoon and the dirt road or the roads, work including the access roads to the lock. The 528 and 401 modifications, all constructed as a single project to include the benefits, effect of the benefits on the Banana River north of 528 for the years to come during the weir construction. And I'm very much in favor of that, and I'm hoping that that'll happen because it'll necessitate, or it will remove our small boats from deep draft or potential deep draft areas that perhaps we can increase our construction. So I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you. We always appreciate your insight. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending the Sea Trade Cruise Global, which was a very impressive event. We had quite a few people that stopped by our booth. I don't know if that was because of who we were or because I think we had the best coffee in the whole place. So enjoyed that. And then last Friday, along with the port ambassador, or I should say the junior ambassadors, I had a tour of the Disney Wish. And so that was pretty good. It was Melanie was there, and Port Ambassador Jessica Maxwell, as well as former Commissioner Hadaway. So it was nice to get on, and I'd never been on a Disney ship before. So that's my report.
Commissioner Justice.
Yes, had the opportunity to give a port update to the Space Coast Board of Realtors, a couple hundred realtors there. Florida Council of Yacht Clubs, that was an interesting group. They didn't offer me a membership or anything. But, Merritt Island Square Mall leaders, and then finally the Cocoa Beach Kiwanis. A couple Mondays ago, John, we had JMAS here, the Joint Military Attaché School was here again. I want to again compliment the staff that supports that. That's really a valuable session for those people, and these guys are going to embassies around the world, and most of them have maybe one port in their country sort of thing, and they get the understand and appreciation of the value of what this port is worth, what can do is worth the time to do that. And then finally, 14 April, you mentioned it, John, it's a shrimp feast. It's a shrimp feast, okay? Propeller clubs, so we raise money for the for our college scholarship money. So that's at Terminal 5. It's always a good time. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Lloyd.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Allender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention briefly that at the TPO Regional Intermodal Connection Committee meeting last month, as you might recall, that committee is doing a study, trying to perhaps to convince Brightline to have a station in Brevard County. It's my honor to be representing the port as a member of TPO on that. I do want to thank the people from the port that were there, Diane, Bob, and I will say that Bill Crow did an outstanding presentation on the panel discussion regarding Port Canaveral and the impact I think that it has on the entire Brevard community. He was outstanding. Thank you.
On that same subject, Jerry, while we're talking about it, the city of Cocoa has requested that we support the station location that's proposed in Cocoa. And I wonder if it's not a bad idea if we don't write some kind of letter supporting that location as commissioners.
The committee is not, my understanding, the committee is not headed towards trying to pick a location for a station, but it's to gather information to present to Brightline about having a station in Brevard. So I think, personally, I think it would be premature and meaningless for us to go on record as supporting any one point, because that's not what the committee's about.
Well,
Melbourne
not necessarily.
That's the problem.
Not necessarily TPO, the committee. I'm talking about us as a commission.
Well, we did the study a few years ago, and which we paid for, recommending that study concluded that the best place for a location of the station would be in, I'll say, the North Cocoa area at the turn.
Yeah, so I've just had discussions with the mayor and also with the city manager, and they've asked us for our support. I know that it's not something that we're going to get a lot of cruise passengers. They're not going to fly into Orlando and then ride halfway and then get off. And so, the logistics of Port Canaveral, I don't think are specifically involved. But as a community leader, I'd love to see it in Cocoa. So I don't know if we write a letter saying that we support it. I don't know if the other commissioners are in that same mindset, but I'd rather see it in Cocoa than Melbourne.
Yeah, well, it won't be in Melbourne. That's my opinion. But it might be that, and I see Diana's raised her hand, I think it would be appropriate for maybe Diane on the legislative political point to...
Please, Diane,
That's
please
what it would be.
come on up. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to address the comment that Commissioner Lloyd has brought up and remind the commission that you have passed a board resolution supporting the location of a train stop in Cocoa. And that was passed, I believe, in 2014 or 16, shortly after the study was completed.
Yep.
So for the record. And that has, I have provided that to the city of Cocoa, copies of those resolutions.
Okay.
Diane, how formal, if formal at all, is the liaison process among the communities in Brevard that might be more vocal about the location of that, is in terms of also how we interact with that process?
I've been in contact with the city of Cocoa going back 18 months. The city also organized kind of a familiarization tour of the Brightline stations, which we participated in. I have provided them with economic data, substantiating the kind of volume that comes to Port Canaveral, the visitor counts, et cetera, and copies of the board's resolutions that have been passed in I believe it's 14 and 16. They have not requested through me a specific letter supporting the establishment of a train stop, a station in Cocoa, but I can tell you that a lot of the communities in Brevard County have interest in this, and even down by the airport. So ultimately, the decision will be made, obviously, by the service provider, Brightline, as to where or when they might put in a train stop.
Are you or Commissioner Allender aware of any timeline in that regard?
None. None.
The idea on this committee is, that was formed by TPO, was to gather information, which it's now in about the third month of that. Once that information is gathered, the data, that would then be presented to Brightline to encourage them of the opportunities of having a station here. But it would be up to Brightline to decide when, where, and
Correct.
why.
Correct.
Can we?
I might add, if you haven't had the opportunity to ride on the Brightline, you ought to take it. I've taken it from West Palm to Miami, and it's, to me, it's exciting. It's a fantastic thing. Much different than any railroad in Europe or any other place. And anyway.
Can we get copies of those? That was.
Sure. Absolutely.
I was first here in 2016, and I know I can't remember them, but I'd like to. I mean, maybe we need to update it. I love it. I'd like to see it in the Port District, and I don't mean to hurt Melbourne's feelings, but I'd much rather it be in Cocoa than down in Melbourne. And I think that's what Cocoa. They're just asking for our support, and maybe we need to update the letter, the resolution.
That certainly is the prerogative of this commission, so I will make sure that Melanie gets copies of those and forwards them on to you.
Thank you.
Melanie has them, she says, so I'm certain you'll be getting those shortly.
Good.
Yeah, I am.
Good. I have no report. Having said that, therefore, I'll remind everyone our next meeting is 26 April this month, at the end of the month, obviously. Same time, same place. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Yeah.